So what could you do if you chose to live a more intentional life? Well, maybe you could be like me in my backyard here for the first time ever, recording a podcast, living my best life here in Claremont, Florida, right? I don't even know where I live today. With that, right, I could also be talking to friends, having a podcast, or wait, that's what I'm doing because I chose this. And what I love about today's guest, my friend Sean Rosensteel, is he is an intentional guy. Now, he hasn't always been, and we're going to talk about that because sometimes that doesn't happen. But he put out there that he wanted to sell 1,000 copies of his book, The School for Intentional Living. And holy crap, he did that. And he's way surpassed that. Amazon #1. Great guy, good friend, known him for a long time through thick, thin, and all sorts of crazy stuff. But he's here to talk to us today about his latest book. And I say latest because I know you're going to write more, The School for Intentional Living. What's up, Sean? How are you, buddy?
I'm good. Thanks, Phil. I'm so excited to be here. I watch you all the time live, and now I'm actually on your show. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, totally, man. I wouldn't miss it. I'm so glad that you're here too. So I got to tell you though, what the heck possessed you to write a book? Because writing a book is not an easy task. It's not like you wake up and you're like, yay, today I'm done writing a book. So what possessed you, bro?
I'm coming after you. How many books have you published? 5 or 6, I think, right?
Yeah, five or 6. Yep, that's right. With a couple more comments, sure.
Yeah.
So you're coming after me.
I've been an avid reader for a while, and I really appreciate, and I've always admired authors for their ability to, organize and clarify their thoughts into the written word and really have that courage to expose themselves to public criticism, right? So it was my way of, I guess, giving back and making a small contribution in my own unique way. And it's something that's been on my radar screen for a handful of years. I finally had this idea in late 2019 as far as the entry point into how I could write about this very broad topic of intentional living. So it's been kind of a bucket list item for me personally. And I've got a few other ideas that I'd like to pursue. But, first things first, the focus right now is on this freshman attempt, so to speak.
Wow. Freshman, rookie, whatever it is, man, it's a really good book. And I'm glad you wrote it because, you did tackle some important stuff in there. So first, before we even talk about that, Sean, let's explain what is intentional living to you, because I think that's an important framework that people need to understand.
Yeah, to me, it just means, making the most of our time each and every day, putting our God-given talents and abilities to good use, making a difference in the lives of those we lead, love, and serve. And ultimately, I think leaving a lasting legacy, living a life of importance and significance, which I think many of us, desire to do.
Cool. I'd love that. I think that's important. A lot of us do desire that. So, Sean, I talked about how this hasn't always been your gig, right? You haven't always been Captain Intentional. So let's take us back here to when you were a young boy. Because I have to tell you, so we've been friends 10, 15 years. And I read this. I'm like, hold on. Sean's not always been the wholesome guy that I know. So talk to me about growing up. What a little pain in the butt you were for years. Because I think that's an important framework. It gives everybody hope that they could still turn out as good kids.
Right. I've been warning my wife of this. We have 3 kids, 6 and under now. I'm like, karma's a real, it's coming back. It's only a matter of time before we get those calls from jail asking to bail them out, So no, I had a very amazing upbringing, and I think followed a few role models who were into some pretty reckless behavior during my teenage years, and certainly throughout my college years. I was very blessed to go to college, and I pursued this idea of conventional success, right? And I after I graduated, I went into business for myself. I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. And I thought, it was all about making a lot of money and having those big homes and, fancy toys and flashy cars and all the rest of it. And I ended up making some pretty foolish decisions and very negligent decisions. And I actually went bankrupt shortly after going into business for myself, after making some poor choices. And when I went bankrupt, it was about 30 days before my wedding date. So it was a very interesting time. You can imagine the conversation with my future in-laws. It was like the biggest sales presentation of my life, right? So I had to figure things out. And as part of my bankruptcy, you had to disclose all of your debt. And I can remember my attorney I didn't think much of it at the time, but my attorney said, okay, is this all of your debt? And I said, well, I do owe my folks a little bit of money. They had, lent me some money helping me through college. And then when I entered the real world, they had lent me some more money to get, my feet settled in. And I disclosed that debt too. And then I was sitting in my car shortly after filing the final paperwork with my attorney. And it dawned on me that my folks would receive this official letter in the mail from the federal government saying that their son had discharged this debt. So I figured I'd owe them a little bit of a phone call. So I called them, and what they told me that day was something that they told me 100 times, but I broke the news. And after a long silence, my dad said, Sean, no one is responsible for you but you. And then my mom chimed in and she said, it's time to find a quiet place and figure things out for yourself. And I was 28 years old, Phil. So at that point in time, after a lot of reckless behavior, you read the book, I kind of streaked across the field and bore it all, told a lot of, confessed a lot and just shared everything that I had, been through. And that was the first time in my life that I really answered the wake-up call. I had a lot of wake-up calls that went unanswered. And that was the first time that I really answered the wake-up call and started to figure things out, as my mom had put it. And I think eventually, I thought I was a late bloomer. And I'm like, I can't believe it took this long. I was financially bankrupt, but I was also emotionally, physically, spiritually bankrupt as well. And I couldn't believe it took me that long. But the more and more I talk about this and teach about this intentional living topic, the more I'm understanding, hey, you can be 16, you can be 75. It's more of a psychographic than anything else. And one of my great mentors, Wayne Dyer, talks about the shift that many of us go through. We go from this place of ambition, just sheer force and ambition to get things done and to move the needle to a place of more meaning, right? So we search for more meaning in our lives. So I feel very fortunate that shift took place. I think now, looking back at such an early age in my late 20s.
Wow. So we got one viewer here, Ann McNeil. She's a master builder MBA. She's like, thanks for sharing. Certainly agree with that, Sean. I think that's important. So why did that wake you up though? Is it because of your parents? Is it because, you just finally hit bottom? Did you wake up and be like, holy crap, what am I doing here? Or some combination of all of that?
Two things. Actually, it's one thing, but number one is I had a fiance, and here she is talking about her dream of someday becoming a mother and raising a family. And I thought, oh my gosh, I can't even be responsible for my own life, let alone another human being. So certainly there was some necessity there. And I also recognize that, I think a lot of us at some point go from a place of what's in it for me to how may I serve. And I think for the first time in my life, embarrassingly enough, I was looking at this from all angles thinking, wow, I'm about to be responsible for this other human being. I better get my act together. But also it was my folks, my parents gave me, their unconditional love. My whole life I was, just had an incredible childhood, and I felt like a failure. I felt like I had failed them. And so between that, I would call it not artificial. It was necessity, but it was responsibility. I felt a sense of responsibility to my future wife. And I felt a sense of responsibility to my folks to turn things around and, kind of show them that they did right by me and that they raised me correctly and all the rest of it. That was very good intrinsic motivation for me. And then, of course, the thought of that compelling future, someday raising children of our own, and being the role model in the household for them as their father figure. So all of those things kind of smacked me like a ton of bricks. It took a long time. If you read the book, it took a few tries, a handful of them, but finally got there.
Cool,
I'm still working on it today.
Yeah.
I still find myself asleep at the wheel, going through the motions in certain areas. So for me, it's a lifelong pursuit. It's not something that it's like, wow, I'm there. I'm living as intentionally as I can. It's this ongoing process. It's a journey, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's a series of choices, right? When we think about intentionality, right? You made a choice and then you made another choice. And really the beauty of this, I think, and the power of it is the series of choices, the compound effect, if you will, to steal a Darren Hardy word, right? It's all about the compounding of this, the daily choice, right? So talk to me, Sean. Tell me about your days now. I mean, now you got married, got 3 kids, right? You're running up the the Intentional Living Academy, right? We're going to be doing that. So talk to us about what a day looks like and the choices that you make so people can see how intentional living really plays out for you.
Sure. Well, I feel very fortunate to own my own business, right? So I may have a little bit more flexibility than others who are pursuing a career. They have, they're employed, right? So I'm very fortunate in that regard. But I typically, I mean, my calendar. I disclosed it in the book, but I schedule quite a bit. I feel like if it's not on the schedule, it's not real. And I have this intention to be with my family and spend the evenings with them. But if I'm not scheduling that out and mentally blocking that time, I might be physically with them. I'm physically present, but emotionally and mentally, I'm still at work. So I have to really discover some of those turning points throughout my day. So I'll wake up. I typically run every other morning. I have a little bit of a morning routine where I'll do some reading or journaling, a little bit of exercise. I'll have a glass of water. I usually have, I'm very lucky. I try to have breakfast every day with my family if I don't have any meetings early. I typically roll in at about 8:00. And I just moved, as you know, from Chicago to Dallas. So I've been very lucky. I'm using my spare bedroom in my brother-in-law's house to work from, which has been fantastic because, 3 kids, 6 and under, it gets a little chaotic. But I roll in and then I basically plan the workday. So I, look at the calendar, say, okay, what's today look like? What are my pre-existing commitments? Any conflicts in the schedule that I need to solve for early? Anything I need to prepare for as far as a speech, presentation, meeting, whatever it might be. And then I look at my priorities. So I say, okay, based on what I want to get done at the end of the week, some of the key items I want 3 to 7 things that need to get done this week. What are the things I need to focus on today? What are my priorities? So I typically schedule those priorities. And then I have some blocks for email and outreach, right? So text messaging, social media, email, answering to voicemails, things of that nature. I usually get home about 5:30. I have a wonderful dinner with my wife and kids, and then we typically do some family time for an hour or two. I do what is now, Phil, about a 90-minute bedtime routine. It's gotten completely out of control.
Whoa.
It's just crazy. So, reading and telling some stories and saying our prayers and all this stuff, it's a little bit out of control. So that needs to be condensed a bit. But yeah, about 90 minutes with the kids to do the evening routine, get them in their PJs, washed, brushed, all that good stuff. Then I have about an hour of me time or an hour of time for my wife and myself to kind of get together. And, we're 2 ships passing in the night, and attention is a very scarce commodity in our home. We can't seem to get a word in edgewise with these little kiddos. So we tend to connect in the evenings. Certainly on Sundays, we do about 60 or 90 minutes every Sunday. We have a little touch base because a lot of things go unsaid and a lot of issues that we need to talk about and solve for don't get discussed during the week. So we typically meet on Sundays. But, if you were to look at my calendar, it's pretty routine, but I do block time for spontaneity. So I've got 3.5, 4 hours during every evening on the weekdays for my family, which is awesome. So we can play games, we can watch movies, we can do homework or schoolwork, which is pretty light at this stage. My oldest is in 1st grade now. So it's pretty routine. I've gotten into a pretty good habit. And then during the weekends, it's completely wide open. My wife keeps me pretty busy, keeps us pretty busy with the kids. But my weekends just, I'm a big fan of variety too, at the same time as I'm a fan of structure, right? So I need a little variety and some spontaneity in my life too. So typically I leave that for Saturday and Sunday.
Very cool. Wow. That is really structured and yet very spontaneous. And one of the big things you talked about is something that I talk about with sales professionals all the time, sales leaders all the time. It's the power of the time block, actually putting stuff on your calendar. And you mentioned something that I've never heard anybody put on their calendar before, and that it's time for spontaneity. I think that's really interesting, right? Time for spontaneity. So talk me through what that might look like, and how do you prevent the world from encroaching on your time for spontaneity, Sean?
Yeah, well, I think we're setting ourselves up for disappointment when we time block and then we don't meet those demands of ourselves because we get interrupted or there's a distraction or whatever else. I think we have to have more compassion for ourselves as well as for other people. If you remember the gold rush of the 1840s, I think now this information age, it's going to be known as like the attention rush, right? It's not easy, as we all know. Our attention and our focus, I believe, is our number one asset. So we need to protect it and we need to do better at directing it, in the appropriate directions, right? So I do my best to hit about 80% compliance. every day. If I can hit 80% compliance with the schedule I've laid out in the morning for myself that day, it's a big win. And sometimes I can't do that. So we need to get ready to triage our schedules. Just yesterday, I had to do that. I was off track by about 2.5 hours. So I came back in my calendar and basically reset things for the afternoon. So those lower priorities that I was going to focus on in the afternoon got pushed to the following day. And I brought up some of my higher priorities from the morning into the afternoon. So we need to get really good at triaging. I'm working my calendar all day, every day. And what's really, I think, powerful, and you hit the nail on the head, Phil, is this compound effect. You know, if we have a good day, those good days lead to good weeks lead to months and quarters and years. And you brought up Darren Hardy. I love his penny story. He tells a story in the book, The Compound Effect, about the penny example, right? He says, you know, most people would rather take $3 million today than a penny doubled every day for 31 days. While a penny doubled every 31 days is over $10 million. So I think we need to give ourselves a little bit more compassion when our schedules aren't met, but also recognize that if we can hit 70 to 80% of our intention every day, you know, we're going to come up for air at the end of the week and have a really good, productive week. And I've been in sales. You and I have talked a lot about sales strategies and best practices. And I work with a lot of salespeople, and they're disciplined, right? They have their, 2-3 hour blocks of prospecting, as a lot of us call it, every day. And that really adds up. And if you ask some of those people, how do you get your results? They're like, it's simple. I turn off my phone, I shut down my email, and I start dialing, or whatever form of prospecting they're doing. So I think a lot of us have to play the long game versus, look in the short term and say, will I make a sale or not today? It's not about that. It's about at-bats, right? So how many at-bats can we get in a given day? Multiply that by a week, and we've got a lot of opportunities, right?
Absolutely. I love that you talk about those at-bats and you love playing the long game. I mean, right now, with all the challenges that are going on, we cannot control sometimes the outcome. In fact, I'd argue we never can. But we can control how many times we swing. We can't control our number of at-bats, right? Those lead indicators. So we have to find those. So Sean, talk to me about what your lead indicators look like and how we can find our own, because I think sometimes, we say this in the abstract, right? Hey, find your lead indicator. But how? How do we find those? And what have you focused on to help you achieve that compounding intentional living success?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, Phil, my lead indicators today are more marketing lead indicators than sales lead indicators, mostly. But I think like anything else, I love this idea of reverse engineering the outcome, right? It's nothing new. But, my lead indicators are typically, the outcome for me is enrollment into my Intentional Living Academy. So if I reverse engineered that, it happens to do with, webinar attendance, and it happens to do with book sales, right? And things of that nature. So from a business perspective, I have more marketing leading indicators than sales leading indicators, but there's a lot more to life than just work. So in my personal life, I have, running cadence leading indicators. My goal is to run every other day. I have meditation leading indicators. I have conversations with my wife and date nights. Every 2 weeks we have a date night together. Those are some leading indicators. And if we can hit that, 80% of our quarters, if we can hit those, every other week date nights, we have a really good 90-day period together, right? We have a really good quarter together. So you can create leading indicators out of anything, your health, your wealth, your relationships. That's what's really exciting, because those leading indicators give you that opportunity to course correct along the way. And as you know, like chapter 2 in my book is all about progress reports. And back in school, we had those progress reports. So what were the purpose of those? They were to help us course correct before report cards came in. I mean, isn't that true? Report cards came in, it's like a P&L statement, too late, rear view mirror. That's looking back 30, 90 days, whatever it may have been, just like report cards in school. But by generating progress reports and identifying those and tracking those leading indicators, not just in our work, but in our life as well, we can obviously course correct before it's too late, before we, eventually reach a major catastrophe in our life if we're caught asleep at the wheel, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so important. I always forget about progress reports, right? I mean, your book absolutely reminded me that, right? That being able to live more intentionally really has helped me focus on that, because I forget, like, it's okay to take stock of where I am right now and then make a change, right? If I've got new information or if I've got sometimes new priorities, right? Sometimes, things happen and we have to move right with that. And sometimes we're going this way and we recognize, oh boy, we really need to be going that way. So that's really, really important, that course correction before we get too far off track. But then how do we pull that back, Sean? Like, take us through that, because in the book, you take us through some awesome exercises for making sure that we get back once we're kind of off that focus and unfocused and can move ahead with purpose.
Sure. Yeah, I think the trick is to identify these things early, right? Momentum, as we all know, is a powerful force regardless of its polarity. The further you go in the wrong direction and the further you pick up momentum in the wrong direction, the harder it is to redirect that momentum the right direction. So I do a progress report in my life and in my business once a week. That just seems to be the sweet spot for me. It gives me the awareness. That's all it is an awareness tool, right? So it gives me that awareness early. I've gone too far down the track in the wrong direction so many times in my life that I know how painful that is, whether it's with your health. I've battled addiction, whether it's with your wealth. I've obviously struggled financially, whether it's with your relationships. I've had my battles over there. I know how difficult it is to repair the damage when you go too far in the wrong direction. So it's very motivating for me. It's easy. It's not difficult any longer to make those quick course corrections sooner than later, because I know the result if I don't do what I need to do. So I know some people who do that daily. That to me is a little bit too frequently. And I know people who do it on a monthly or quarterly basis, right? And then we've got our New Year's resolutions people. I was one of those people once before who do it once a year. So I think we all have to just find our stride, and we all have to realize what frequency makes the most sense based on where we are right now in life, what the demands look like, what roles we play in business, in the household, and whatever else, what communities we're a part of, what our responsibilities are. So I think it all depends. And it's, as you read the book, that, my job was to guide people through and discover what was best for them. I like to think that we all need to be experts in our own life. We need to be experts of ourselves, not of anyone else. And that's really my goal, is to identify, what is it that I want in life, from life? Where is it I'm going? And ultimately, how is it I'm going to get there? And what do I do on a daily basis to make sure I'm moving the needle and gaining that momentum, which is such a powerful force, in the right direction? And I love what you just said. It's the old "who moved my cheese," right? It happens constantly. We move. You and I just went through a move. So some certain things change. We get into a new stage of life. We get a new job, or we sell business, start the next business. We get into a new relationship. I mean, change is the only constant, right? So we need to be constantly looking at these things, making sure that, what we're paying attention to are the things that truly matter for us. Because as you know, it's way too easy to go out of bounds and start drifting and go through the motions, right? Conventional wisdom, suggests that we go to school, we get good grades. Some of us go right from high school into the trade. Some of us move on to earn a college degree, advanced degree. We get that good job. It's like, that conventional wisdom really screwed me up. It's never worked well for me, that herd mentality. So I think it's our responsibility to figure things out. And that's what that book was about, was just kind of be your guide as you go through this self-discovery for your own life, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And to show you the power of each and every choice making such a big impact, which is really something that I found was super powerful about the book. I love that you talk about, once a week is really good for you. If daily works, go ahead and go daily. That's okay too, right? Ann McNeil here, she says picking up the momentum, right, is really important. Become an expert in your own life, and kind of repeating what you had said there, Sean, right? How will I get there each and every day before it gets way off? So thank you, Ann. That's good. So Sean, what are some pitfalls though, man? Because this sounds, this is pretty pie in the sky, man. Yay, I'm always going to make the right choice. Well, what happens, man, when we don't? Or what are some of the pitfalls that we can avoid based on some decisions maybe that you've made or you've seen others make that have read your book or worked through your course?
Yeah, one of the things that's scary but also liberating is that there's no guarantees, right? There's no guarantees in life. There's no guarantees in business. And, what I've found, and I think we've talked about this before, Phil, but like some of the wrong choices that I've made in life turned out to be some of the best lessons I've learned. So I usually look at it through that frame. Like, look, I have to make a decision. I'm a pretty indecisive person. I'm working on that, but I tend to like dwell and just let these big decisions linger for too long. And we all know that some of the best business people out there are very decisive. So that's something I'm working on personally. But I think letting ourselves off the hook and saying, based on everything I know, based on my history, my experiences, this appears to be the best choice or the best decision I can make today. But hey, if it's the wrong decision, I'm sure there are some learnings and lessons along the way, and I will, gain all of that experience over the next however long it is. And that'll make me that much better, faster, stronger, everything else. So I think indecision is definitely one of the pitfalls. Decision's a powerful thing, right? I mean, you make a decision, and if you can go all in and commit to that one decision, it's amazing how fast you can move. It's amazing how much meaningful action you can take when you've fully made up your mind on something. All of a sudden, the path at times becomes clear, right? So I'm a little bit intrigued by this thing called decision. I know I need to work on it personally in my own life, but I also think there's some things working behind the scenes that really help to get you where you're looking to go faster. And a lot of it too, I think, happens to be this particular activation system, right, in your brain, that function that helps you focus on the right things in your environment. I think it's said that every second of the day, there are 11 million bits of information coming in through our five senses, so that RAS, that function helps us take, 50 bits, 50 every second out of that 11 million and tune into the right things. But without making a decision, especially as it relates to our careers, or am I going to improve my health, or am I going to pursue this relationship, or am I going to get out of this relationship? The moment that decision is made, oftentimes things show up in our environment. The universe conspires with us, and we all of a sudden find those solutions sitting right in our lap.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome advice, man. So folks, you need to make a decision. Be intentional about your life. I encourage you, pick up a copy of Sean's book. You can only get it right now in Kindle, PDF, or whatever from Sean, or audio book. Sean reads his audio book. The physical book will be out soon. You can find Sean at SeanRosensteel.com. So Sean, if you had one more piece of advice, what would that be?
Before that piece of advice, if I may, it looks like Phil went out. He warned me about this. There's construction around his house. So here we go. You're stuck with me, everybody. One thing, we set up a little special for everybody in Phil's camp. If you go to my website, /PhilG, the paperback is actually available. So if you order the paperback or the Kindle version on Amazon, you can, or anywhere really, Barnes and Noble, wherever you shop, you can forward a copy of the receipt. You can forward a copy of the receipt, and I'll give you the audiobook version for free, as well as my one-page implementation guide. So Phil, I was just letting people know, if you go to my website, /PhilG, there's some bonuses there if you buy the paperback or the Kindle, whatever version. But your question, one last message. Yeah, so I believe that in our final moments, many of us will wonder if we passed or failed at this beautiful thing we all call life. And I think it's important to, make some of these tough decisions that we have to make today, so that when we get to the end of our lives, which is inevitable for all of us, we won't have to wonder, about that difficult question. We can have no regrets. There was that book, The 5 Regrets of the Dying, by Bronnie Ware. And she was this palliative care nurse, and she, cared for patients in the last 2 to 3 weeks of their lives. And she recognized a pattern, and she recognized that there was 5 common threads, common regrets of all of her patients. And the number one regret that she noticed was that people wish they would have lived a life that was truer to themselves and not one that other people expected of them. So that was very powerful when I read that book. And when I took that away, I thought, holy cow, there's no better time to start than right now. It's all we have is the present moment, right? So.
Awesome. So folks, get started now. Get connected with Sean. Sean, thank you so much for your time today, for your insight as you always bring, man. It's always great to see you. And folks, go to SeanRosensteel.com, pick up your copy of the book, get moving now. Be decisive. Sean's working on it, and you can too.
Thanks, Phil.
Buddy.
Appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Thank you.